I'm going to be talking about building a dashboard in Stata using access to live databases. So I'm just going to go through what a dashboard is, and then Stata's dyne.dot command, which is what creates the dashboard. I'm going to go through the JDBC command, which is what does the live database connection, and then how to build a dynamic dashboard do file and then automate it. So a dashboard just presents data visually and is meant to be easy to understand at a glance. So common usages are in business analytics, where you might want to display performance data, or you might want to be able to quickly see how systems are performing. And an automated live dashboard will provide up-to-date information quickly and efficiently. So this is a dashboard that I created in 2020 during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, just to update our office on everything that was happening. And this I did in Stata. So it just takes information from an SQL database that was updated daily, and it downloads and analyzes it. So there's an overview, and then I've done a small bit of statistics, so an ANOVA comparing the states, and then you can also look at individual states as well. So I did this with the dyne.dot command. So this is what creates the dashboard. So it converts markdown syntax, which is just a really quick and easy way of saying you want something to be formatted a particular way, and it will convert that into the HTML equivalent of the formatting. So for example, if you wanted to create a heading, you just put a hash in front of some text, and the dyne.dot command will convert that into a heading. So the other part of this command is that it reads and interprets Stata's dynamic commands. And this is what tells the converter what is Stata and what is markdown syntax, so it can seamlessly link between the two. And it works just like a do file. So you run the dyne.dot command on your do file, and you can pass positional arguments to it as well. So that allows you to automate it. So the markdown syntax is obviously how you do the formatting. So it will convert into HTML. The most important markdown syntax, which I'll show in a moment, is probably the table syntax, but you can use all of the markdown formatting that's out there will be converted. So for example, if you put an asterisk before and after a word, markdown would convert that into an italicized word. And then you can also add in your own HTML if you want to make, if you know HTML and you want to have a bit more granular control over what you're seeing and what's being included, you can put your own HTML in there, but you don't need to. So the dynamic tags are really what makes this move seamlessly between the commands and the markdown syntax. So the dynamic tags of most note here are the dddo and /dddo tags, and you would put these above and below any Stata commands that you want to run. And so this tells Stata that anything within those two tags is to be run in Stata, just like a normal do file. The dd display tag can be used anywhere in the document, even within headings and things, and that will include as if it had been seen in the display command in Stata. So if I put display macro, it would print the macro as it would in Stata if you ran the display command. And then the dd graph dynamic tag will include any graphs that you've generated. So if you set up your analysis and you ran a bunch of commands and you created some graphs in memory, you can then pop them in the dashboard using the dd graph tag. And then the dd include tag is important for including tables or any other text files really, but I mostly use it for tables. And this is because the way that the command works is it actually runs all of the dynamic tags before it then goes through and converts all the markdown. And so what that allows you to do is you can export a table in Stata. So if you pop it up using the collect commands and you collect export it, you can export it to a markdown file and then include that with the dynamic include tag, and it will all be converted to markdown as well. So a little bit of markdown syntax that I used to create some of the tables is, so this is the table markdown syntax. So you just put pipes. If you don't know what a pipe is, it's just above the enter key on your keyboard with the backslash. So you put the pipes and then the text in between each pipes, that denotes the columns, and then each new line is a new row. These don't have to line up. It's just that for the example, I've made them line up. It'll still all convert, even if you've got more text in some rows or columns than others. And just below, if you've got a header row, the row immediately below that just has hyphens in between the pipes, and that says that the row above is the header row for the table. But the JDBC command is what allows for the connections and everything. So this was added in Stata 17, and it allows you to connect to SQL databases to load or insert data. So it can also execute SQL statements on the database for more kind of granular control, but there's Stata commands that make just loading and inserting the data really quick and easy as well. So to get the connection up and running, you will need the JDBC driver, which will just be a Java jar file. And you pop that along your Redo path. So I usually just pop it in my personal folder, but anywhere along the Redo path, Stata will be able to find it. And then you'll also need to know the class name for the driver. So that should be when you pick the driver for your particular SQL database connection, the information on what the driver class name is should be there as part of the documentation. And then you just add the connection in Stata with the JDBC add command. So you give the database a name, and this allows you to quickly swap between different databases. If you want to add multiple, just give them a name and use JDBC connect with the database name to swap between them. But JDBC add and then a name, and then you give the name of your jar file, which has the driver in it. You give the driver class name and then the URL to access the database, as well as your user ID and password that you use to log in to access that. And then you can view tables and things with JDBC show tables, and then you load it just by giving the table name, or you can insert with the insert command as well. So I've just got a little video that just shows this. So in this one, I'm using the connect command instead of add because I've only got one connection. But if you've got multiple, that's when you want to add them with database names. But you can see I've given the driver class, there's my Java file, and then my database. This is actually on my computer, that's why it's not a very secure one. But I've connected, and then I can just look at the tables. It's nice and quick. So these are my, this is my COVID database. And there's loaded 8,000 observations just really quickly, and you can see it's just got case numbers per day. The date is already in Stata format. That's just because that's how I ended up creating the SQL database, but might be. And then, so I've loaded a different table, and you can have a look at all the different tables and jump between them. I did initially have this set up with an SQL database that wasn't mine, that a nice person was updating, but they're no longer collecting the data for it. So I just pulled all the data down and made my own database so that I could get my show off my dashboard. So this is everything that you need to know to make your own dashboard. So all of the HTML, I just get that pointer. This is all the HTML that you need to know on this page. And this all works using a special style called a grid, which you can see here. So this is what's called a class. And this just encompasses everything that's going to go within the dashboard. So display grid is what makes it a grid, and then grid template columns is what sets the number of columns that you have. So I've just got it set at 2 columns. If I wanted 3 columns, I would just add another 1FR, and it would automatically format everything so that you had 3 distinct columns. And then I've also added a font size here to make the code blocks smaller. So the reason that I've done this is when I initially ran it with Stata output included, the Stata output was very big and kind of pushed some other things off the screen. So 65% is what I put to make it reasonable, but you can change this depending on what you have. But so that's all you need at the top. You open with your div grid class. And then when you want to put an item in your dashboard, you just need this set of lines. So you start with an opening div, you give a space or a return line, you then put in the dynamic tags or the markdown syntax that you want to go in that block. Once you've done all that, you give another space, and then you close out the div with the /div. And you can put as many of these items in as you like, and they will all populate into a grid format like a dashboard. And then once you're right at the end, you close everything out with a second /div once you've completely finished, and then leave your last line as just a blank return line. The reason for this is that the little quirk of the command is it doesn't, it misses the last line. So if you just leave the last line blank, then you don't miss anything. So this is extra HTML. So everything on the last page was everything that you need to know to get it to work. These are just a few extra nice to have things if you want to format it in a certain way. So you can put a link tag within your header, like you can see here, to link a style sheet. So if you know any HTML, a style sheet is just what format you can specify certain formats for the HTML web page. So the one I've used here is just one you can get off Stata's reporting section on their website. And then within the grid class, there's a few extra things that you can do. So grid column gap and grid row gap will just widen or lengthen the space between columns or rows. So that's just if you've got 2 items next to each other or above each other that are squished too far together, this will just give a bit more space between items. And then for the grid templates column option, you can add min-max instead of just 1FR. And this just says each box, each block, I want to be no less than 300 pixels, so things don't get squished too much. And then the place items option will just center every item. So everything will be justified center and aligned center. I like that just because I like everything nice and neat. You can also create a title class, which I've done, which I've just put in grid column span 2. So this is the div that I would put at the top. If I wanted a title, I would just put my markdown title within this title div, and it would span 2 columns instead of 1. So it would sit central at the top of the dashboard. If you had 3 columns for your dashboard, then this would just be a 3 instead of a 2. And you can create different classes for the different types of items if you like. So if you want your tables to be formatted or aligned slightly differently to how your images look, then you can create separate classes for those, and you just apply them at the top. So it's just class and then whatever the class name that you give it in quotation marks. And then everything else is the same, and it will just change some of the formatting based on the class that you created. And so you can add pretty much anything else that's HTML that can go in an HTML, you can add in. So for my COVID dashboard, I actually added some JavaScript, which is what allows the drop-down menu to click between different items. So you can get really fancy with it, the more HTML that you know, but you can do this. The only HTML that you really need to know is the grids that I talked about on the previous slide. Everything else is just extra if you want to make it more functional. So this is just a small example, and I can't, oh dear. Just trying to turn it off. There we go. So this is just a small kind of example that I made with Stata's auto data set. So I've added a few things that I've talked about on the previous slide. And then I've got all of my setup in a dd.do that's being run quietly so that you don't actually see any of the output of the setup, because I just want it in the behind the scenes. And then you can see each div that I've got. So that one has a table, graph in it. The next one has a Stata output table, etc. So I just run it with the dyne.dot command, and it creates the tables, and then it pops out the dashboard, and there it is. So I've got a title which I pulled from the data set, and then I've got graphs. I've put some texts there in one of them, so it doesn't have to just be graphs and tables. Anything that you might want to put in a dashboard, you can put in one of these. And then I've just shown the two different types of tables. So Stata actually, with the collect commands, allows you to export both Markdown and HTML. So the reason that you would want to use one over the other depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. So if you want everything to be styled with a particular style sheet that you have, then if you export it in Markdown, it will just have the Markdown. So there'll be no extra formatting that you might have done to it with collect. And so it will just follow the CSS style sheet that you added. But if you want to be really prescriptive about exactly what your table looks like, then you would export it in HTML instead. And these both just show up. So in the setup, I created and exported the tables, and then within the dashboard divs that I created, I had one DD include dynamic tag that had Markdown, and then the other one that had HTML, so you can see them side by side. So this is just my COVID dashboard, just to show you what it was like. And I rewound time on it because it no longer works with all the data. But so I've created a choropleth map. Everything's sort of within the last 30 days. We're looking at tests that have been done, sort of overall tests, and then you've got individual state and territory. And you could do analysis with this too. So I've done some very simple analyses, but you can display complex ones. So I've got an ANOVA there, which I pulled with the collect commands. And then if I just pick a different state, New South Wales didn't record recovery, so that's why that one says no data. But if you have a look at the table, these are all individual t-tests. So I've done ACT versus New South Wales, WA versus New South Wales, all at once. And then it's all turned into a single table using the collect command. So I can compare each state to each other state, and you can have a look at how each state has been doing over the past 30 days versus the whole of Australia. So the last part about this, the dashboard is live because it's connected to a live SQL database that's being updated daily. But to automate it, I actually need to use Stata's command line functions. So this does work both with Mac and Windows, but I'm just talking specifically about Windows because that's what I used. If you did want to try any of this with a Mac, you can just email Survey Design and I can help walk you through how to do it on a Mac. But for Windows, you create a command line, which you then save in a batch file, and that batch file can then be set up in Windows Task Scheduler to run based on certain conditions. So my batch file, I just called daily COVID dashboard.bat, which is the batch file. And if you wanted to make your own, you just can create that in Windows just with Notepad. So you pop whatever your command line is into a Notepad file and then just click Save As and save it with the suffix .bat for a batch file. And my batch file just has one line. So it starts with the location of my Stata application. And then I give two options, /E and /B. So /E is just saying, I want you to run everything within Stata, but I don't want a prompt at the end. So it just totally automatically, don't tell me when you're done, just do it and close. And then /B is saying to record a log file of everything that's been run in ASCII, an ASCII log file. And then after that, I give the Stata command that I want to run. So in this case, I'm just running the single dyne.dot command to run my dynamic dashboard do file, which it takes positional arguments. So the first positional argument is the current date, and you can use Stata system variables for this kind of thing as well. I've done the current date minus 730 to just rewind time 2 years, so that the dashboard would still create, because there's no data anymore, unfortunately, for the not as much data from COVID. And then the second argument that I've given is the location where I want the dashboard file to save. And pop that in my batch file, schedule it with Windows Task Scheduler, and every day, if that's when I schedule it, it will run and it will update. And I never have to touch it again. So lastly, I'll just kind of go over the Windows Task Scheduler. So this is what it looks like in Windows 11 if you have that. So you just create a basic task, you'll give it a name and a description. And then you set when you want it to trigger. So for mine, I wanted it to trigger daily at 12 o'clock. The database that I was pulling from updated at 10 o'clock. And I like to give a couple of hours leeway just in case the database might not be exactly 10 o'clock that it gets updated. So I like to give a little bit of time before I pull from it. But I've set it up daily. You can set it up at any time period. You can even set it up when you log in. So if you have something that you need to run, a report you need to run every morning, you can select when I log on, go away, make yourself a cup of coffee, come back, and the report is done, ready for you to look at. So in this case, I'm looking at every day at 12. So I set that up, and then you want to start a program. So that's what your batch file is. That's what Windows Task Scheduler sees it as. It's a program that it's going to run. And then you just select the location of the batch file so it knows what it's meant to run. And then it's all finished. Click finish. It's all set up. And so every day at 12 o'clock, I get an updated COVID dashboard. And I never have to touch it again. So that was my dashboard.
Really cool stuff, Laura. Thank you very much. It almost looks like, to me, you could be writing fully automated blog articles, almost like if you had an AI tool connected to it that writes some text around your results, you would never have to look at it again. It would just essentially not just give you results, but even perhaps even some text around it.
Mm.
Might be worth looking into. There are a number of questions here from people. I think the first one was from John. Just going back to see. It's quite a lot coming in. The first question from John was about whether there's a way to import variable and value labels. I suspect it's related to his PanelWiz tool.
I guess it would depend on if you can do it in Stata, you can do it with this. So
right. Okay. So it would be a Stata-based solution, I guess.
Yeah. So I obviously haven't tested it, but if you had an SQL database with one table that had the labels in it and then the other table that had the data in it, I think you should be able to link them.
Mm-hmm. Question from David White. Is it possible to have Stata connect to multiple databases at one time using JDBC? And also a related question, is it possible to access multiple tables in a database?
Yep, so you can connect, if you add multiple connections with the JDBC add command and give them all database names, you can swap between them by just typing JDBC connect and then the database name. And so within a Stata session, once you've given the jar file and the JDBC path, you can just swap between them really quickly and easily. And you can use Stata's frames to load multiple tables at once as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I'm wondering if you can provide the slides so that people can look at them again. That's another question about the presentation, just if you can make them available so people can replicate what you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So the do file that I used to create my my dashboard and the slides should be on our website.
Mm-hmm. A question from David, does the update need to happen daily? I believe you showed you can probably pick different time.
Yeah. So you can set it up to run on whatever schedule you wish, as well as on a particular event occurring as well. So like, for example, when you log on to the computer, it might be set up to run as soon as you log on, it'll pop up.
Here's a question from Azadeh. Is a question I was also wondering, is the dashboard published online? I saw there was an HTML link, but I assume that you would still have to link that to a website.
Yeah, so you'd still have to put it on a website. So if you've got, for example, if you've got it set up just on a network that you have access to, I could put this on, we've got a network at work, so I could pop this on our network and everyone at work would be able to look at it. And it's the same with a website. You can host it on a website. And depending on how your connection is to the website setup and everything, you can even automate that so that it creates and updates the HTML page as well without you having to touch it.
Oh, that makes sense. And I have a follow-up question from John. How do you deal with variable and value labels in SQL?
So that one I would have to look into. So I don't know terribly much about SQL and how it works. I've been trying to learn, and I learned enough to be able to get this to work, but not enough for the more technical.
Question from Jason Ferris: does MFA cause problems for JDBC?
Multi-factor
possibility to deal with MFA.
So based on the JDBC command in Stata, there's no function that I remember that does multi-factor. So it's possible that may cause problems. But if you're trying to make a connection and you get a multi-factor pop-up where you have to click yes to allow, depending on how the connection is set up, that should work.
Right. Another question from John: what kind of widgets are possible on the dashboard, e.g. drop down to change states and things like that?
Yeah, so anything that you can do with HTML. So I use just a little bit of JavaScript to make my drop-down work, and most websites will run any script that you put in a script tag in HTML. Anything that you can do with that.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Demetrius is asking, could I connect with Google's BigQuery to...
If it's an SQL database, I would assume so. I've obviously not tried it.
Yeah, they're starting to ask hard questions now. And a question from Peter Robinson, are you able to set it so it changes when new data is added to the database? I think that's the idea, right? That you're...
Yeah, so if you schedule it, so for example, with my one, the database I was originally connected to updated every day at 10. So if I connected I like to give a little bit of leeway. If I connected at 10:01, it might not have had time to properly refresh itself. So I left a couple of hours, but I would connect at 12 o'clock and it would all be there and the new data would come in and everything would update.
Right. Really cool stuff. Looks like a lot of applied econometricians will be unemployed one day because of tools like this. Everything's being automated. No, it's very cool. Thank you so much.